What happens when humanity's greatest experiment wakes up with powers beyond imagination and a thirst for revenge? You won't believe how far he'll go to uncover the truth. The hum of machinery echoed through the sterile corridors of the orbital research station Aurora Prime Dash. It was here, floating silently above Earth's atmosphere, that humanity's greatest experiment had been conducted. Cryosleep technology promised immortality, or at least longevity beyond mortal limits. For decades, volunteers were frozen in stasis chambers, waiting for the day they would awaken in a new era. Among them was Subject 312, whose name had long since faded into obscurity. His chamber stood apart from the others, marked by cryptic warnings etched onto its surface by technicians who feared what lay within. On this fateful morning, Dr. Evelyn Park adjusted her glasses as she reviewed the data scrolling across her tablet. Beside her, Chief Engineer Marcus Hale paced nervously, muttering under his breath about protocol violations. "We shouldn't be doing this," he said, glancing at the massive cryo chamber looming before them. Its glass casing shimmered with condensation, obscuring the figure inside. "There's too much we don't know." Evelyn ignored him, her focus razor-sharp. She'd spent years preparing for this moment. If successful, it could revolutionize space travel, making interstellar journeys possible without aging passengers. Failure wasn't an option, not after all they'd sacrificed to get here. With trembling hands, she initiated the defrost sequence. The chamber hissed, releasing clouds of vapor that swirled around the room like ghostly apparitions. As the fog cleared, a face emerged, gaunt, pale, and hauntingly familiar. Subject 312 blinked slowly, his eyes adjusting to the harsh fluorescent lights overhead. At first glance, he appeared human enough, but there was something unsettling about the way he moved, the deliberate precision of each gesture. When he finally spoke, his voice sent shivers down Evelyn's spine. "Where am I?" Marcus stepped back instinctively, clutching his clipboard tightly. "This isn't right," he whispered. "Something's wrong." And then Subject 312 smiled, a slow, predatory grin that revealed far too many teeth. Subject 312 didn't move immediately after waking. Instead, he studied his surroundings with unnerving intensity, taking in every detail: the blinking monitors, the frightened faces of the scientists, the faint smell of ozone lingering in the air. Then, without warning, he slammed both fists against the inner walls of the cryochamber, causing cracks to spiderweb outward. Alarms blared throughout the facility, red emergency lights bathing the room in an ominous glow. Evelyn shouted orders, trying to maintain control of the situation. "Containment team, report to Sector C immediately." Her voice betrayed the panic bubbling beneath her calm exterior. Meanwhile, Marcus scrambled to activate the chamber's lockdown protocols, but nothing seemed to work. The system was unresponsive, as though something or someone had overridden it. With a final, deafening crack, the cryochamber shattered, sending shards of reinforced glass cascading onto the floor. Subject 312 stepped out, completely unfazed by the freezing temperatures still emanating from the ruptured tank. His bare feet left frosty imprints on the metal flooring as he advanced toward the stunned researchers. "You woke me," he said, his tone eerily conversational. "Why now? After all these years?" Before anyone could respond, the station-wide intercom crackled to life. "Security breach detected in Sector C. All personnel evacuate immediately." The automated voice repeated the message over and over, adding to the growing chaos. Evelyn grabbed Marcus by the arm and pulled him toward the exit, but Subject 312 blocked their path. Marcus and Evelyn barely escaped with their lives, but Subject 312 isn't done with them. As tensions rise aboard Aurora Prime, the true nature of this enigmatic entity begins to reveal itself. Stick around to find out what secrets he's hiding, and why everyone involved might live to regret disturbing his slumber. Subject 312's presence was like a storm cloud rolling into the sterile, controlled environment of Aurora Prime Dash. His movements were deliberate, almost predatory, as though he were sizing up his prey. Evelyn and Marcus froze mid-step, their escape route cut off by the towering figure blocking the doorway. The frost clinging to his skin melted away, revealing an unsettling smoothness that seemed unnatural. His eyes glowed faintly, shifting colors between icy blue and a deep, blood-red hue. "Answers," he repeated, his voice low and commanding. "I've been asleep for centuries. You woke me. Now you owe me explanations." Evelyn swallowed hard, her scientific curiosity battling with her instinct to flee. She forced herself to meet his gaze, though every fiber of her being screamed at her to run. "You're part of an experiment," she began, her voice trembling but steady. "Cryosleep technology. We needed to test its limits." He tilted his head again, that unnerving smile returning. "Limits? Is that what you call it? Freezing me alive for centuries while the world moved on without me." His tone was calm, almost conversational, but there was an undercurrent of menace that made Marcus's blood run cold. The alarms continued to blare, punctuated by the sound of distant footsteps. Security forces rushing toward Sector C. Subject 312 didn't seem concerned. Instead, he took a step closer, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the room. "And now you've brought me back. Why?" Before Evelyn could respond, the doors burst open, and a team of heavily armed guards stormed in, weapons trained on Subject 312. "Step away from the scientists," their leader barked, his voice amplified through a helmet-mounted speaker. Subject 312 turned slowly, his glowing eyes locking onto the guards. For a moment, no one moved. Then, with a speed that defied logic, he lunged forward, disarming the nearest guard before anyone could react. Chaos erupted as the rest of the team opened fire, but their bullets ricocheted harmlessly off an invisible barrier surrounding him. "What is this?" Marcus stammered, watching in horror as Subject 312 dismantled the security team with terrifying efficiency. "He's not human," Evelyn whispered, her mind racing. "Whatever they did to him during cryosleep, it changed him." Subject 312 stood amidst the wreckage, his chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. The guards lay unconscious around him, their weapons scattered across the floor. He turned his attention back to Evelyn and Marcus, who were now backed against the wall, their faces pale with terror. "You humans always make the same mistake," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You play God without understanding the consequences. Did you really think you could control me?" Evelyn clenched her fists, trying to muster some semblance of courage. "We didn't know what would happen to you," she admitted. "The cryosleep process was experimental, unpredictable. But if you'd just let us explain." "Explain what?" he interrupted, his voice rising. "How you abandoned me. How you left me trapped in that frozen hell while you went about your lives." Marcus stepped forward, surprising even himself. "Look, we don't know what you've been through, but attacking us isn't going to fix anything. If you want answers, fine, we'll give them to you. Just don't hurt anyone else." For a moment, Subject 312 seemed to consider this. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he sent a nearby console crashing to the ground, sparks flying everywhere. "I'll decide what happens next," he growled. "Not you." As the station's lights flickered and the air grew colder, Evelyn realized they were dealing with something far beyond their comprehension. Whatever Subject 312 had become, he wasn't just a man anymore. And he wasn't done yet. The tension aboard Aurora Prime reached a breaking point as Subject 312 led Evelyn and Marcus through the labyrinthine corridors of the station. His movements were eerily silent, despite the destruction he left in his wake. Every door he passed crumpled inward as though struck by an unseen force, and the station's systems began to fail one by one. Emergency lights cast long shadows across the walls, creating an atmosphere of creeping dread. Evelyn tried to keep her composure, though her mind raced with questions. How had Subject 312 developed such abilities? Was it a side effect of the cryosleep process, or had he been altered before entering the chamber? She glanced at Marcus, whose face was pale and drawn. He looked like a man preparing for the worst. "We need to contact command," Marcus whispered, keeping his voice low so Subject 312 wouldn't overhear. "If we can get a message out, maybe they can send reinforcements." "And risk provoking him further?" Evelyn shot back, equally quiet. "He's already destroyed half the station. If he finds out we're trying to call for help—" She trailed off as Subject 312 suddenly stopped, turning to face them. "What's this about calling for help?" he asked, his tone dangerously calm. Neither scientist responded, but their panicked expressions said enough. Subject 312's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, the temperature in the corridor plummeted. "You think I'm stupid?" he snarled. "I can hear everything you say, every thought you have. You're planning to betray me, just like everyone else." Before either of them could protest, he raised a hand, and the walls around them began to warp and twist as though caught in a gravitational anomaly. Evelyn stumbled, clutching at Marcus for support. "Please," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "We're not your enemies. We just want to understand what happened to you." Subject 312 hesitated, his expression unreadable. Then, with a dismissive wave, he released his grip on the station's structure. "Fine," he said, "but if you try anything, I won't hesitate to tear this place apart." Subject 312's threat hung heavy in the air as Evelyn and Marcus exchanged a glance fraught with unspoken dread. The station groaned around them, its structural integrity faltering under the strain of his inexplicable powers. Yet, despite the chaos he had unleashed, there was a strange sense of control in his movements, like a predator toying with its prey. Evelyn took a cautious step forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "If you destroy the station, you'll die too," she said, trying to appeal to whatever shred of logic might remain within him. "You're still human, aren't you? Or at least, part of you is." He turned to face her, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Human?" he echoed, the word dripping with disdain. "Do humans survive centuries frozen in ice? Do they walk away from cryochambers with abilities that defy your science?" He gestured toward the twisted metal and shattered glass littering the corridor. "No. Whatever I am now, it's because of you. Your experiment made me this way." Marcus clenched his fists, anger momentarily overriding his fear. "We didn't ask for this," he snapped. "You volunteered for the program. You knew the risks." Subject 312's smile returned, colder and more menacing than before. "Did I?" he asked softly. "Or did you simply erase my memories? Tell me, Dr. Park, what exactly did you do to me before you froze me?" The question hit Evelyn like a punch to the gut. She hesitated, her mind racing back to the classified files she'd reviewed during her research. There were gaps in Subject 312's records, redacted sections she'd never been able to access. Could it be possible that his memories had been altered or worse, erased entirely? Before she could respond, the station shuddered violently, throwing all three of them off balance. Alarms blared anew, accompanied by an automated warning: "Structural failure imminent. Evacuate immediately." Subject 312 straightened, unfazed by the chaos. "Looks like time's running out," he said, his tone almost amused. "Decide quickly, doctors. Will you help me uncover the truth, or will we all perish together?" The decision weighed heavily on Evelyn and Marcus as they scrambled to their feet. The station systems were failing rapidly, and the air grew thinner with each passing second. Yet, even amidst the mounting danger, Evelyn couldn't ignore the gnawing curiosity that had driven her into science in the first place. If Subject 312 was right, if his memories had been tampered with, then uncovering the truth could have implications far beyond their immediate survival. "We'll help you," Evelyn finally said, her voice firm despite the fear coursing through her veins. But only if you promise not to harm anyone else. Subject 312 studied her for a long moment, his glowing eyes unreadable. Then, with a curt nod, he gestured for them to follow him. Lead the way, Doctor, he said. Show me where you keep your secrets. As they moved deeper into the station, the damage became more apparent. Entire sections were collapsing, and the once pristine corridors were now filled with debris and smoke. Marcus stumbled over a fallen beam, cursing under his breath as he struggled to keep up. This is insane, he muttered. We're walking straight into a death trap. Better than staying here and waiting to die. Evelyn shot back, though her own doubts gnawed at her resolve. Their destination was the station's central data core, a heavily fortified chamber designed to withstand catastrophic failures. It was also where the most sensitive information about the cryosleep experiments was stored, including Subject 312's original files. When they arrived, Evelyn keyed in her access code, her hands shaking so badly she nearly missed the keypad. The door hissed open, revealing rows upon rows of servers humming softly in the dim light. Subject 312 stepped inside, his gaze sweeping across the room. Impressive, he said, his tone laced with sarcasm. Now, let's see what secrets you've been hiding. Evelyn worked quickly, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she accessed the encrypted files. Behind her, Subject 312 watched intently, his glowing eyes reflecting the flickering lights of the monitors. Marcus stood guard near the entrance, keeping an eye out for any signs of further collapse, or worse, reinforcements. It's locked, Evelyn muttered, frustration creeping into her voice. There's another layer of encryption I don't have clearance for. Subject 312 stepped closer, his presence looming over her. Let me, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. To Evelyn's astonishment, he reached out and placed a hand directly on the server rack. A surge of energy coursed through the system, bypassing the security protocols as though they were nothing more than paper walls. Lines of code scrolled across the screen at an impossible speed, finally settling on a single file labeled Project Lazarus Dash. What is this? Subject 312 asked, his voice low and dangerous. Evelyn hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. I don't know, she admitted. It wasn't part of the official documentation. Subject 312 opened the file, revealing a series of videos and documents detailing classified experiments conducted decades ago. As he scrolled through the contents, his expression darkened. They lied to me, he whispered, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. Everything they told me, it was a lie. The contents of Project Lazarus unfolded like a nightmare, each revelation more horrifying than the last. The videos showed grainy footage of Subject 312, then known only as Volunteer X, undergoing procedures that blurred the line between science and torture. His memories had indeed been erased, replaced with fabricated ones designed to make him compliant. Worse still, the documents hinted at genetic modifications conducted without his knowledge, experiments intended to enhance his body's resilience to cryosleep, but which had clearly gone far beyond their original scope. Subject 312's hands clenched into fists as he absorbed the truth. They didn't just freeze me, he growled, his voice trembling with fury. They turned me into this. He gestured to himself, his glowing eyes reflecting the flickering lights of the server room. A weapon, a test subject, a monster. Evelyn felt a wave of guilt crash over her, though she hadn't been directly involved in the earlier stages of the project. Still, she was complicit by association, part of the system that had allowed such atrocities to occur. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the servers. We didn't know about any of this when we brought you back. If you had what? Subject 312 snapped, turning on her with terrifying intensity. Would you have left me frozen? Let me rot in that chamber forever? Before Evelyn could respond, Marcus interjected, his voice sharp with desperation. "This isn't helping anyone," he shouted. "We're running out of time, and if we don't figure out how to stabilize the station, none of this will matter anyway." As if on cue, the station shuddered violently, sending sparks raining down from the ceiling. The structural warnings grew louder, more urgent. It was clear they were fighting against both Subject 312 and the impending collapse of Aurora Prime Dash. "You want answers?" Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Then help us survive long enough to get them. We can't fix this if we're dead." For a moment, Subject 312 seemed to consider her words. Then, with a resigned sigh, he nodded. "Fine. But don't think for a second I've forgiven you." The trio moved quickly through the crumbling station, their path illuminated by intermittent flashes of emergency lighting. Subject 312 led the way, using his newfound abilities to clear debris and reinforce weakened sections of the structure. Despite his earlier threats, there was a grudging pragmatism in his actions, as though he understood that cooperation, even temporary, was their best chance of survival. Evelyn struggled to keep up, her mind racing with questions. What had Project Lazarus truly intended to achieve? And why had its creators gone to such lengths to hide it? She glanced at Subject 312's towering form ahead of her, his unnatural strength and eerie composure painting a picture of something far removed from humanity. Was he even capable of forgiveness or mercy? Their destination was the station's core reactor, the only hope of stabilizing the failing systems before the entire structure disintegrated. As they approached, Marcus hesitated, his face pale with apprehension. "Are we sure about this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "If he decides to turn on us now, there's no way out." "We don't have a choice," Evelyn replied, though her own doubts gnawed at her resolve. Inside the reactor chamber, the air was thick with tension. The control panel was partially destroyed, wires sparking dangerously as Evelyn worked to reroute power. Subject 312 stood nearby, watching her every move with an unreadable expression. "You humans are fascinating," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "So fragile, yet so determined to survive. Even when you know the odds are against you." Evelyn paused, meeting his gaze. "And what about you?" she asked. "What do you want, now that you know the truth?" Subject 312 didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his attention to the reactor, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Survival," he said finally. "For now." With a surge of energy, the reactor roared back to life, stabilizing the station just as the final supports began to give way. For a brief moment, relief washed over Evelyn and Marcus, but it was short-lived. The reactor's hum was a temporary reprieve, but the damage to Aurora Prime was far from repaired. The station groaned under the strain of its battered infrastructure, and the air remained heavy with the acrid smell of burnt circuits and melted metal. Evelyn leaned against the control panel, her hands trembling as she caught her breath. Marcus slumped onto the floor, his face pale with exhaustion. Even Subject 312 seemed to relax slightly, though his glowing eyes never stopped scanning their surroundings. "We bought ourselves some time," Evelyn said, breaking the silence. "But not much. The core won't hold forever." Subject 312 crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "Then we'd better make the most of it," he replied. "What's next?" Evelyn hesitated, her mind racing. Stabilizing the reactor had been step one, but they still needed a way off the station and answers about Project Lazarus Dash. "There's an escape pod bay on the lower level," she said finally. "If we can reach it, we might be able to send a distress signal before the station collapses completely." Marcus frowned, clearly skeptical. "And what happens when we get back to Earth? Assuming we even survive that long." "That's not our problem right now," Evelyn shot back, her voice firm despite her fatigue. "One crisis at a time." Subject 312 smirked, the faintest trace of amusement flickering across his face. "Practical," he said. "I like that. Lead the way, Doctor." As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors once again, the tension between them was palpable. Every step felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss, each decision fraught with uncertainty. Marcus kept glancing nervously at Subject 312, who moved with an unsettling grace, his presence both protective and predatory. When they reached the escape pod bay, they found it partially sealed off by debris. Subject 312 stepped forward without hesitation, his hands glowing with energy as he tore through the wreckage with ease. Behind him, Evelyn couldn't help but marvel at the sheer power radiating from him, a stark reminder of how much he had changed during his centuries in cryosleep. The escape pod bay was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint hum of emergency lights overhead. 3 pods remained intact, their sleek surfaces reflecting the dim glow. Evelyn approached the nearest one, her fingers flying over the controls as she initiated pre-flight checks. "We'll need to split up," she said, glancing at Marcus and Subject 312. "Each pod can carry 1 person. Once we launch, we'll transmit a distress signal. Hopefully, someone will pick it up before." "Before what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp with frustration. "Before Subject 312 decides to finish what he started?" Subject 312 chuckled darkly, leaning casually against the wall. "Relax, Marcus," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I'm not going to kill you yet." Evelyn shot Marcus a warning look before turning back to the controls. "We don't have time for this," she snapped. "Just focus on getting into the pods. We can argue later if we live that long." As she worked, Subject 312 wandered to the edge of the bay, peering out through the reinforced glass windows at the vast expanse of space beyond. His glowing eyes reflected the stars, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he looked almost peaceful, as though lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" Evelyn asked cautiously, unable to resist the question. He didn't turn around immediately, but when he did, his gaze was piercing. "Freedom," he said simply. "For centuries, I was trapped in that chamber. Now I'm free. But at what cost?" Before Evelyn could respond, the station shuddered violently, throwing all 3 of them off balance. Alarms blared anew, accompanied by an automated warning, "Core breach imminent. Evacuate immediately." The warning echoed through the escape pod bay like a death knell, sending adrenaline coursing through Evelyn's veins. She scrambled to her feet, shouting instructions over the cacophony of alarms and groaning metal. "Get into the pods. Now!" Marcus didn't need to be told twice. He bolted for the nearest pod, his movements frantic as he sealed himself inside. Evelyn followed suit, her hands trembling as she initiated the launch sequence. Subject 312 lingered near the window, seemingly unfazed by the impending disaster. "Aren't you coming?" Evelyn called out, her voice tinged with desperation. Despite everything, she couldn't shake the feeling that leaving him behind would be a mistake, one they might all regret. He turned slowly, his glowing eyes locking onto hers. "You humans are so predictable," he said, his tone laced with disdain. "Always running, always hiding. But not me." Before Evelyn could respond, the station shuddered violently again, this time with enough force to send her sprawling to the floor. Sparks rained down from the ceiling as the walls began to buckle inward. The reactor's hum grew louder, more unstable, signaling its imminent collapse. Subject 312 stepped toward her, his movements deliberate and unhurried. For a moment, Evelyn thought he might leave her there, to die alongside the station he so despised. Instead, he reached down and grabbed her arm, pulling her to her feet with surprising gentleness. "Get in the pod," he commanded, his voice firm but devoid of malice. Evelyn hesitated, torn between fear and confusion. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "Because I'm not done with you yet," he replied cryptically, his expression unreadable. With little choice but to trust him, or at least pretend to, Evelyn stumbled into the remaining pod. As the hatch sealed shut behind her, she watched through the window as Subject 312 moved toward the final pod, his silhouette illuminated by the flickering lights. The countdown to launch began, the automated voice counting down from 10. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she braced herself for what came next. Outside the pod, Aurora Prime was falling apart, chunks of debris floating away into the void as the station's structural integrity failed completely. Through the small window, she caught one last glimpse of Subject 312. He stood motionless in his pod, his glowing eyes fixed on her. There was no fear in his expression, only an eerie calm, as though he had already accepted whatever fate awaited him. As the countdown reached 0, the pods launched in rapid succession, propelling them away from the doomed station. Evelyn gripped the edges of her seat, watching as Aurora Prime receded into the distance. Moments later, the station erupted in a blinding explosion, the shockwave rocking her pod violently. For several long seconds, there was silence, broken only by the soft hum of the pod's systems. Evelyn exhaled sharply, her body slumping with relief. They had made it, at least for now. But as she glanced at the other two pods drifting nearby, her relief was tempered by unease. What would happen when they reached Earth? Would Subject 312 honor his unspoken truce, or would he see their survival as just another opportunity to exact revenge? Hours passed in silence as the pods drifted through the vast emptiness of space. Evelyn stared out the window, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. Marcus's pod remained dark, its occupant likely unconscious or too overwhelmed to communicate. But Subject 312's pod glowed faintly, a reminder of the power and unpredictability of the man inside. Finally, a faint signal crackled to life over the comm system. It was Marcus, his voice shaky but alive. "Evelyn, are you there?" "I'm here," she replied, relief washing over her. "Are you okay?" "Barely," Marcus admitted. "What about him?" Evelyn glanced at Subject 312's pod, her stomach tightening. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but we'll find out soon enough." The three pods continued their journey toward Earth, each carrying its own burden of secrets, fears, and unanswered questions. For Evelyn, the weight of guilt and responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had uncovered the truth about Project Lazarus Dash, but at what cost? And what role would Subject 312 play in shaping humanity's future or its destruction? As the blue-green orb of Earth came into view, Evelyn felt a strange mix of hope and dread. Their story wasn't over, it was only beginning. What did you think of this chilling tale of science gone wrong? If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more thrilling adventures and mind-bending mysteries.